Thank you very much, Lana, for your very kind introduction. So it's very nice to be with you today and to contribute to the dissemination of the HRS4R process. I think it's a process that is really important for the researcher, and we all know that let's say the well-being of the researcher and also the opening and the possibility for them of their career development is really of importance for our institution and also for contributing to, let's say, the construction of the European research area. And this will be my first slide, is to remind you what you are contributing for by working on the HRS4R process. For sure, you are working on the development of your institution and so on. And we will go back to this question, but what is really important is to remember you that you, at the early 2000s, we can say 2005, the European Commission was really aware of the development of the European research area based on the openness of the market to the researcher. I think that if the project is to develop Europe, due to the different, let's say, context we have in our countries, we have to try to have a possibility of moving the researcher from one country to the other one. And the Commission and the European Union, they focused on this aspect of opening the market, not only for the researcher, for all the workers we can have in Europe, but it's very important to have a Europe that can develop and reach the same level, we can say, of excellence, of quality, of richness, of development, and so on. So that's why this three items I wrote on the slide are really of importance. The ERA objectives, priority 3, are to develop an attractive, open and sustainable European labor market for recruiting and retaining researchers in environment conducive of effective performance and productivity. It's very what I wrote in red is really of importance, because as you will contribute to that, it will be important for the Commission for you to show that you are answering those questions. You are working on the recruitment, the environment, the development of performance and so on. Offering sustainable career development system for researchers at all career stages. Very, very important. So you know that they invest themselves a lot in the research, and after having done or completed their PhD, the problem today in Europe is how to continue with this really wonderful job. How can they work and also develop their career in companies also? You don't have only the academic work. And the last thing that is really of importance is the participation of women in research, because we know that we have to try to develop the possibility for women to have a career, and a lot of difficulties and perhaps, let's say, equality is still to be developed in our countries. We cannot perhaps today the question of dissemination, of openness, of open science and so on, but it was not in the written in the first text, but we can think that for developing conducive environments of performance, dissemination and a very quick dissemination of the results is really of importance. So for those who participated in the Meritcade first, let's say, seminar, perhaps could it be redundancy in what I will say, but it's important for the other one to hear a little bit about the award. So the award is just like a contribution to the ERA objective. Very early in 2005, the European Charter and Code was really the founding documents that was really of importance. So what are the rights and the obligation of the researcher? How can the member states develop and help to reach those objectives written in 40 principles? And in 2005, many institutions signed and committed with the principle of the Charter and Code, but they forget to write action plan and to develop their own action. But the UK, because at the level of the United Kingdom, they developed the Concordat. It was a group of 80 university and association and so on that worked together in order to reach the implementation of the principle. Unfortunately, the other member states didn't really react to the Charter and Code. And in the evolution in 2010, the European Commission suggested to deliver the award HR Excellence in Research to those who commit with a process for the development of the action plan. That's what is the HRS4R process. It's a tool developed with the help of different, let's say, experts in order to help the institution to embark in the system, but really embark in the system, not only commit with the principle and all that. Okay, so it's really important to remember that this process is on volunteer basis. It's not mandatory to have the award. However, it's of interest to have it. Why? Because you know that you have the famous Article 32 in the Model Grant Agreement. This article says that all the institutions who benefit from European research funds have to provide evidence or to demonstrate that they work on the improvement of the working condition of the researcher. So you can keep in mind that if one of your professors, let's say, is partner or coordinator of a European project, he will have to, or she will have to, provide evidence that they worked on the career development of the researchers and so on. What is interesting is to provide this evidence at the level of the institution. So once you can give it for all your researchers, you feel better and they will feel better in doing research, what is their job, not to provide evidence of evolution of the system. So it's a voluntary process. It can be done at the level of the institution. It should be done at the level of institution for the benefit of the researcher who participate in the European programs, but also for the benefit, and for sure, for the benefit of the researcher themselves who are in your institution. And we will come back to this question of the benefit. So I don't know if you can see the mouse. So the HRS process is just like a cycling process. And you grow in, let's say, implementation. You become more and more close to the principle. And the first step, the initial step, is what we will speak about today. So once you've endorsed the principle of the Charter and Code, and it's very important to be supportive and to commit with this process, you will apply for the award, and you have 3 steps. You have the step of the gap analysis, the OTMR checklist, and this will be the next, let's say, the next seminar you will have at the end of October. But it's just like a gap analysis of the recruitment procedure, and you will have to write an action plan. After having granted the award, you will have to implement your action plan, and you agree to be submitted to an evaluation by peers on a regularly, basis of 3 years. And that's what is there in green and in blue. Okay, so we will speak about this part here, here today. What are the essentials of the process? The commitment. So you have there 40 principles, and some of them may apply to your context because some of them are more devoted to let's say, to founders or to employees. But we know that in university or in research centers, generally, we are employees of the researchers. The process suggests to proceed to a gap analysis. What does it mean? You compare your practice to the principles, to define an action plan in order to better match with the principles, so to fill the gap. And one mandatory, let's say, what is mandatory is to publish your HR strategy and your action plan in order to disseminate and to be attractive and to show to the researcher that you are working on their concern. The keywords here are really of importance. The process is cycling. It's mandatory to involve the stakeholders. You have to work on the implementation. It's not enough to have an action plan and then to fall asleep. The action plan has to be coherent. The action plan is devoted to fill the gap you've identified in the gap analysis, to provide evidence of your progress. It's the principle of the evaluation. And also to show that you are ambitious. It's not just for having the logo and all that. So, and we will come back to all those questions during this presentation. The commitment letter is the endorsement of the principle. I still said it. And it's important to commit also not only with the principle by saying, okay, those 40 principles will be my guidelines. I agree with the principle, even if some principles sometimes are difficult to apply, but I also agree, who is I, the board of your institution, agree with the process itself. So it means agree to be submitted to evaluation periodically, but also to do it for the best, for the benefit of the researcher. Okay, so it's interesting in the commitment letter to write about your motivation. It's not only to sign a still written text. If you have something to send to the commission, and to say, okay, I commit with this principle, I commit with the process, I will strongly support it. And if you can write motivation, it will be of highest value. So the requirement is to have it signed by the highest level of the institution. Why? Because they will be the first supporter of what you will do as an HR manager. And it's very important to do it. And during the whole process, to have the support of your board. Why? Because those actions are to be implemented. And very often it's something of importance for the institution, not only for the benefit of the researcher, for the benefit of the institution, but also it's required big effort to try to develop those principles. You cannot, you alone as an HR manager or a researcher, try to work on this question of flexibility at work, or work on, let's say, permanent contract, work on giving the opportunity or improving the system of supervision, the evaluation of the researcher. It needs absolutely to have the support of the board for trying to progress and to increase in efficiency in this kind of process. So the commitment letter has to be sent to the European Commission. Once you wrote your commitment, it's just like the start of a 12-month period when you will have the opportunity to develop your gap analysis and your action plan. So you have an example on the EU website, so the HRS platform, of what can be a commitment letter, but you can write it yourself. Why 12 months? Because 12 months, it's enough for developing your action plan and for submitting your application. Very often at the early beginning of the process and the period, the institution took 1 year, 2 years, 3 years to develop their action plan. It's not possible to do it. If once you decide to jump in the process, you have to work on the process. And 12 months is by experience really enough for doing it. If you need more than 12 months, it means that the commitment is perhaps a little bit too weak. Or perhaps can you also meet some difficulties at the level of the institution, for sure. But the people from the the EU Commission, from the unit, Michele, Anka, and so on, are really open to the discussion with the partners. So you can always, let's say, write to them and explain if you have and if you need meet any problem. But it's also good to say to you, 12 months, it's enough. So you will devote, let's say, resources, human resources to the process. And it's a question for the institution for how long, how many times shall I have to devote this kind of resources for submitting the application and for starting the process. 12 months, it's good enough. 3 months is a little bit too low period for doing it. But generally, I think that the institution can really do it between 6 and 9 months if they work hard on this process. Okay, the principle of the gap analysis is to compare your practice with the 40 principle. And it's very, very easy. You will describe your gaps. Your gaps, it's, you will do your analysis. You will compare what you are doing with what is the principle. And you can also give your idea and your actual and potential initiative for improvement. So you have templates on the website of the European Commission where you can find how you can do it. So very easy. You have the number of the principle and they all have number. You have 4 thematic area, and for all the principle by principle, you will write, this is where I am, this is where I can go. And for me, it's very important because it will be for your institution the reference of where you are and where you would like to go and the good ideas you can have. So because when you will implement the principle, you will have to, let's say, to define action for sure, but you can also refer to the gap analysis. And it's very important to keep in mind that you have gaps. What are the gaps? And also to refer to this, let's say, basic analysis you did at the early beginning. Okay, involvement of researcher is really important. We will go back to this question. Evidence, gender, ethics, or TMR, and open science are really important in the analysis because these are the weaknesses we have generally in institution, and it's the key for having science open, for having research mobile, and for having also high quality in research and in recruitment of research. Okay, about the process, how can we do the gap analysis? First of all, set up a steering committee to oversee the process. A steering committee is made of different experts, if possible researchers, why not other stakeholders, that will be involved in, let's say, being the pilot of the systems and the reference for having some possibility of discussion and also bring back the work of some working group. You will work under the 4 thematics headings for those who are less familiar to that. Watch what are the templates to fill, and you will see what are the 4 thematics heading. And OTMR is 1/5, let's say, thematic heading added to the principle of the charter and code. And it's very important to know and to be clear on how you will proceed and how you will work with the different, let's say, groups you can have. Because in the system, what is mandatory is to work with researchers. And we will come back to that. Okay? The gap analysis is done with the researcher. Why? Because it's not a top-down process. It's a bottom-up process. So you or me or some people, the HRS4R manager or the director, the president of your institution has to rely on what are the needs of the researcher. We cannot make the people happy by saying you have to, but by listening what they need, what are the concerns, and how we can improve the working condition of the researchers. The board can have good ideas for sure, but the researcher, they can also say what are the priorities for their development and what is of importance, of interest, of concern for their well-being, but also for their increase in competencies and also in career. Okay, so the gap analysis for me, it's very important because it's a reference. It will be your reference for action. So it means that sometimes you have to stop and to go back to your gap analysis by saying, okay, is it still true? Do I fill the gap? Do I have new gaps? I can tell you the experience in my university when we did our first gap analysis. The first principle is on freedom of research, and all the researchers say, oh yes, we are free to do research. We can do anything we want in research. 10 years after, we rediscussed about the gap analysis because we have some problem of competition between the researchers with each other. So, and some of the young permanent researchers say, so yes, okay, I'm free, but only in the topic of my supervisor, of the head of unit. So I don't feel so free to define myself, the methods, the subject, the topics, and the project also I can write for research. So it means that 10 years ago, freedom was not a question, was not a gap. But today, freedom appears to be a gap for the young researcher. So, and we have to take it into consideration because they have to develop their career and they would like and they invest themselves in good research and in quality of research. If we would like to be creative and innovative, we have to take it into account. Is it a priority for my institution? That's the question of the priority. Shall we mention this gap as an action? Shall we do something for filling this gap? It can be a decision with the researcher, but also with the board of the institution. Okay, so the gap analysis is also the basic documents, the basic documentation for providing evidence of coherence and ambition. So if you can write that you have only one gap, freedom in research, and you say, so I will work and do my action plan on, let's say, flexibility in the working hours or working time, we can say there is something that doesn't match between the gap and the action. So coherence and ambition is really important. What you have to know is that when we speak about publication of the gap analysis is done for you. It's your institution. So it's very, very important to keep in mind that the gap analysis can be kept confidential. I say can because it's your volunteer, let's say, decision. It's your decision to put it all on the website or not. What is mandatory, it's to provide the gap analysis to the assessor for having the opportunity to estimate about coherence and ambitions. But it's not mandatory to publish the gap analysis on your website. Why? Because it's a really, if you do it and if you are doing it honestly, it can be really difficult and touchy to publish what are your weaknesses. The strengths, it's easy to and easy to publish it, but not the weaknesses. So it can be kept confidential. It is not mandatory to publish the gap analysis on the website. So it's I know that it's a question that is of importance for many institutions. This is not mandatory. This is not required for having the award to publish the gap analysis, but to publish a summary of your strengths and weaknesses per groups, per thematic groups, and it's part of the action plan. So the gap analysis is your basis for your work, for developing your action plan, and it's very important also to sometimes come back to your basics in order to see where you are and to have an estimation for being efficient. Okay? So as you had the previous seminar with Mary Kate on the involvement and the engagement of stakeholders and researchers, I will go very quickly on these questions, but it's one of the basics of the process. If you don't involve the researcher, and if you don't provide evidence that researchers were involved in the process, you will not, let's say, be awarded the HRS4R logo. For sure, because it's the basics of the work. As I still said it, it's for reaching the ERA objective, it's for developing your institution, it's for having a researcher that have some possibility of career as researchers, and it's really important to start from their needs. So you have to involve all researchers, and by all researchers, we speak about PhD students, and it's a question in some countries, very difficult, for instance, in UK, but they left Europe, to speak about PhD students involved in this dynamic. For the European Union, the PhD students are early stage researchers, so I have to forget to say PhD students. We can say PhD researcher or early career researchers, and they have also to be involved in the process. You have to involve researchers from all levels. So all researchers mean also that you have to bring in the process and to ask and to involve in the process all the different persons who are working in research. All means each of the researchers normally have a voice and can express their needs and their concern. For sure, we know that it's on the volunteer basis, and we can have some questions when we are doing survey with only 10% of answer from researcher to the survey. You can also involve other stakeholders if pertinent. You can have groups, association, you can work with your spin-off, you can work also with your funders. It depends of your type of organization. And you can use different way of consultation. You can decide to work for writing the gap analysis. You can decide to work with working group. You can make survey. You can have focus group. You can have face-to-face interface. You can discussion. You can have and organize some meetings and so on. So you are really free, because the gap analysis is a status of where you are, who you are, and depend of your organization. For the evaluation, as evaluator, we will never, let's say, we will never say that you didn't use the good way of consultation, of involvement of the researcher. If you can explain why it is of importance and why it's matched with your context. So different way of consultation, but you are free to organize and to do it for yourself, depending of your context. Okay? So be pertinent and coherent with your context. If you have association of researchers, work with the association of researchers. If you don't have association of researchers, or if you have a very small structure, choose another way of consultation. I've read some application of a research center where you had only 10 researchers. Why do we have to organize a survey, an online survey with only 10 researchers? Perhaps can you have open discussion with all your researchers if you have a very small structure? Okay? Be open to all researchers' concerned. So it doesn't mean that you have to answer all the concern of the researcher. You will have to give priority, but you have to work with the priority with them. Is it more important to speak about maternity leave, for instance, or paternity leave today, or is it more important to speak about the supervision of the PhD students? The process is a cycling process. You will probably spend 100 years for reaching and for being, let's say, fully compliant with the principle of the Charter and Code, and you can involve, but you will start with significant action and you will register all the gaps. Okay, if the different level of researchers have different concerns, you have also to consider those concerns. So you can understand that it's not the same, let's say, difficulty a PhD, an early stage researcher have to face than a dean of faculty. But the dean of faculty, they also have needs for and the improvement of their working conditions. So I did a meeting in France the last year, and it was really interesting to speak with the vice rector, because the vice rector themselves, as researchers within the institution, they also have concern, they also have needs. And when they speak about the needs, it's important to take it into account. At least as important to take into account the needs of the PhD students or the postdocs and so on. Okay, so depending of your context, you will consider the different levels, so report of that. Many people do surveys and they analyze the results of the survey for the 5,000 researchers all together. So no, you have women, you have guys, you have PhD students, you have also postdocs. In the postdocs, you have some permanent with permanent position, some other ones that are still with permanent position. Do they have the same needs? Do they have the same concern? How can we help them to have better condition? How can we write the gaps and also collect the good ideas? Okay, if you use survey, please report perfectly on survey results and also design the survey results as adequately as possible. For me, it's not a good survey to ask the people, do you think that we are compliant with principle 1? Do you think that we are compliant with principle 2 and so on? The survey has to make sense for the institutions. And the sense is not always to ask if we are compliant with the different 40 principles of the Charter and Code. So we will come back to the question, and thank you for those who wrote it on the chat. So we will speak a little bit about, more extensively on the action plan. So I think that many of you forget a few. I don't know. So I can see that you are more or less 60, 61, 62, let's say, participant to this conference, and I do not really know where you are in the process, or if you are only interested or still working on some of the aspects. So it's important to remind you that the reference is also not only the process, but also the European Commission decided to write some templates in order to help you to answer the good questions and to facilitate also the explanation of your different information. So on the website, so not the website, or on the Euraccess platform, you will see and you can find all the templates you will have to fill, and you have to use those templates. I've seen I think it was 3 months ago, one application with the templates we had in 2010. So the templates are evolving. The reference is the IT tool, so the platform where you have to write the answer to the questions, but you have also a copy of the questions in a doc file on the website of the Access platform. So it's very important to rely to those documents, okay? So the template on the action plan asks you, first of all, to explain and to give some few words about your context. You have to give some information regarding your institution and to describe your structure. It's very important because at the end of the process, you will be assessed, evaluated by experts who do not really know about who you are. So if we would like to, as an expert, to understand and to verify and perhaps to give you some advice regarding what can be or what could be your action plan, we have to understand who you are. The organizational information is one of the way. The second one is what you will say about your structure. If you have 8 researchers of 10,000 researchers, if you have different sites, if you had mixed research unit with some, let's say, other institution, if you have many European projects or are only working based on, for instance, a foundation or something like that, we can understand that your priority, your gaps, and your possibility of actions can be different. And it's very important for you to explain those questions. So, is it important for you to deal with the question of gender if a part of your university or your research center is in Saudi Arabia? So it's one of the questions, and I still have to face this question. Why do they not speak about gender if they have, let's say, some part of the research, their research done in southern countries of the world? This can be of interest, and we have those questions in mind when we are reading your application. So in this part of the context, you have to describe your actual strengths and weaknesses regarding the group of principles. So that's the part of the gap analysis that is published. So regarding, for instance, the working condition of the social condition of the researcher, we can say that our strength is to give social security to all the researchers, not only to the permanent researcher, for instance. In Belgium, it's the case. The PhD students, they receive salary. The postdocs, they receive salary. We have no, let's say, researchers that are not submitted to social security, but those coming from with their own, let's say, grants from their countries, and they cannot be submitted. This can be a gap. So we have to explain that to the actual strengths and weaknesses, because we can perhaps choose to deal with some of the questions. Okay, so, and it's very important also in this part of the action plan to give some elements regarding your priority and your strategy. That's why we say that the embedment of this action plan in your internal strategy that has also things to deal with governance, with the third mission, with the teaching and so on, but how do you embed this action plan as part of the internal strategy? It refers also to the question of the commitment, and we know that we change, and sometimes we have some president or rector elected for 4 years. So after 4 years, you have big change in the board with the new priority. So how can we continue? How is this process embedded in the life of the institution. It's very important to mention that. And it's very important because you can explain it to the evaluators, but we can also explain it to the world, because the purpose of the HRS4R is to be attractive, is to show that you can be attractive for the researcher. So those who would like to apply in your institution, who are interested in working with you, they can refer to this document that will be published on your website. So this context, who you are, it's really important. And you can, and you must use the website pages on HRS4R for explaining that, with all the possible links, for sure, with your internal strategy. So about the design of the action plan. So I say that you have the template and you have to describe the action. So the must is that action must be action, and I will give you some examples. And you have also to fill the gaps. You can have actions that do not refer to the gap analysis, for sure. For instance, you don't have any principle regarding the communication of the HRS4R award to your researchers. But it can be an action. Because if you would like to have the researcher involved in the process, you have to communicate about your on your success, on your initiatives, and so on. It can be an action. So you can have actions that are not related to the gaps, but you have to have the most important part of your action related or designed for filling the gaps. All the gaps? No, because if you have 100 ideas, we are sure that you cannot develop all the ideas within 2 years. So you have to take into account that you have 2 or 3 years for the development of the action, that the process is cycling. So you will update your action plan. You will update your gap analysis also. It's not mandatory, but it's better to do it. And you will have to develop it for this period and to explain the development you will have within 2 or 3 years on a 2 or 3 year basis. Okay, so the timing is provisional for sure, but it's important to know when you will start, when you plan to complete the action, to arrive at the end of the action, and also the duration. Very often we can see in submission that we have Q1 semester of this year, but we don't know if it's the start, the end, initiation, and so on. So having a good chronogram, and you can add on the IT tool some PDF file for better describing some elements. With a chronogram, you can see when you start, and if you have too many actions. So it's a question of the management of a project. And I think it's very important to think that when you will implement the project, the HRS4R or the action plan, you will have to think in terms of project. When you think in terms of project, you have to know what you will do, action, when you will do the action, who will be responsible for the development of action, and how you will measure your progress. So that's what we are requiring in the action plan. So responsible must be operational. So you can say that the president of university will organize an event for the training of the researcher, or for a discussion on ethics and so on. Shall he be really the actor of the implementation? That's the question. Responsible, okay, but my rector is responsible of everything in the university. Sure, will he start to work operationally on the questions or not? Who will be the people who will collect the information, who will organize the thing, and who will help to measure progress? Indicators, it's one of the things that is really difficult for us. As evaluators, the indicators can be really fuzzy. Indicator is something that is specific and that enable you to measure your progress or completion or quality. But at the very early beginning, it's important to have indicators that can track, register, and measure progress. And it's not so difficult, so easy sometimes to define the indicators. I will come back to that. And you have the last thing, proposed action. You have principle, timing, responsible unit, indicators, targets. Targets, this is the objective or the beneficiaries of the action. So indicators and targets is not the same thing. So indicators is for the measurement of the project, and the target is who will benefit from the result. I will show you an example or examples of what is good and what is not good in terms of action. This is taken from real cases. The action is described as we should improve funding of young researchers in order to increase their participation to international conference. The gap referred to the principle number 38, okay? And the timing is 2021, second quarter, okay? Well, is it the start or the end? Is it the completion date? We don't know, but they will stay during 2 years reflecting to this question. And the responsible will be the academic senate and board of governors. So probably that the gap is that many researchers say that they need some fundings for going to conference, okay? But what about the indicator in this sense? Is it the number of people who were not able to participate in international conference and who will go to international conference? Is it the amount of the funds given, the number of beneficiaries? So this is the line. So you can understand that, is it a good action? Do we have to tell the action in this term, in this, let's say, in this sense? It's questionable. Is it a good action? For sure. It's answer one of the gap. But the description, the responsible and the indicators, even perhaps the timing, is questionable. Second one, reference to the priority 3, raising awareness of employees of ethical rules and regular adjustment. Every year, they will try to see if the researchers are really aware of the code of ethics. Do they know about the code of ethics, for instance? So who is responsible of doing that? The rectorate, the departments, and the council. So you have many responsibilities, many people involved in the process. Okay, and what is the indicator of, or the target? Knowing the code of ethics. So it means that the indicator is the action. But this is not an indicator, okay? So you can see that something can be explained. What would you like to do, when, who will be the people who will be the responsible, but it's not only the responsibility, the engine, the people who will do it, who will help to develop, and how shall we measure the awareness of employee of ethical rules? Very often we say, we can see, okay, we will put it on the website. Okay, but how many people are watching the website? How can we estimate that they know about the code of ethics? These are all the questions we can have in mind. I will show you a good example. This is an action that is to revise the orientation of new, or initiation, induction of new employee, principle 24, starting from Q3 2013. Starting, so we know that when they will start. We don't know when they will finish, but we know. Who is responsible? DHR manager. And what about the indicators and the targets? So discriminate between target and indicator. target is to have new orientation procedure and skill implemented, so it's clear. That's their objective. The action is to revise the orientation, and the indicator is the number of participants in the session and the feedback from the participants. So we can expect them, the HRS4R, the HR manager, to collect information regarding the number of participants and also for the collection of their feedback, so they can progress and they can evolve. So, and this is the weakest, let's say, part of the application received today, is this description of action in terms of action, in terms of answering concern, answering objectives, and being well developed in and also well tracked, and the explanation of the tracking. This is, let's say, the most difficult part, I think, in writing the action plan. Okay? So remember that the action plan is cycling, that you have to be pertinent and realistic. The work was not done in one day. Okay, not all gaps has to be filled within 1 year or within 2 years. You have to be coherent and ambitious, coherent between the action plan and the gap analysis, but also coherent with what you are as an institution. If you have a difficult context, it's important to take it into account. So as we are hosted by friends from Croatia, I can say that in Dubrovnik last 2 months, the question is of importance is the questions of the highest price for the housing and the city. So, and it's something that can block some process for the development of the researchers and so on. So they have pointed this question as being of importance, and they have to adapt their action plan given their context. I was also in some institution where some questions were a change in the law for enabling or for allowing researchers to do some activities. Very important to work on those questions. So you have external factors like the price of the housing. You have external factors like the law, you cannot change or can try to change, but you can also have internal factors because you can also decide that you are in an institution that has not a lot of money for improving some working conditions of the researcher. In my university, we cannot create kindergarten, for instance. It's not possible, but we miss kindergarten seats or beds in our surround. So it's of second priority. We have some things to do first for the well-being of the researcher, and we can discuss of that with the researcher for sure. Give priority and involve stakeholders in the prioritization. Very important, because they can speak about their concern, but they can also discuss on the priority. And it's very important to have this joint discussion, okay? Last but not least, make links with other current actual strategies in your institution. So if you can say that in the action plan, you will not deal with the question of gender because you have another gender action plan, but you have to create the links, and you have also to refer to the progress they are doing in their action plan that you have to explain. It's possible to have embedment of different strategy and to present it and to report on the main, let's say, achievements of the other strategies. You can use your website for explaining it. Okay. About implementation. The implementation is what you will have to do once you will get the award, is to implement the action. So it's what you will do practically for developing this action plan, for implementing the action. So you have to track report to organize, first of all, the structure and how you will do it. You will track progress, so that's why the indicators are really important, and you have to define it from the beginning for sure, for being able to collect information. You will have to report on progress, and you will have to do it with the researchers, so to keep the researchers involved. It's a challenge, but this efficient organization is the key for the success of your action plan and also for your reporting. And every 3 years, you will be requested to stop, to have an overview of what you are doing, and to report to the European Commission on your progress. 3 years, it's not enough. The stop you will have and the self-assessments you will have it's important to stop and to meet the different stakeholders every year or every 6 months, depending of your organization, because you have to meet the people and to know how you involve. And every year you can, and it's better to do it, it's a recommendation, to every year you can stop, update your action plan, because you know that the priority can change, the information can change, you can have different people involved, you can have different priorities depending of your context, so you can update your action plan. I suggest to watch on the gap analysis in order to see if some new things emerge and are necessary to push at the top of your list of action. So the process is involving, and keep in mind that you are not doing it for the European Commission, you are not doing it for the level, you are doing it for the benefit of the researcher who belong to your institution or who can come and be interested in being member of your institution. What are the difficulties regarding the gap and action plan? I still spoke about the difficulties. These are all the items that are there above. Coherence, ambition, involvement of the researcher and explanation of how they are involved, implementation, efficient implementation, and also the definition of the indicators. First of all, write your action plan and your gap analysis for being understood by the people who will read it. So you know that some people are really using a lot of abbreviation. It is very difficult to understand the abbreviation, and for those who will read your submission or your action plan to, let's say, to remember and to keep in mind 50 new abbreviations. It's typical of the French. So you have to describe your context, your priority. You have to let know about you, and you have to write for being understood. One good advice is to write, if possible, directly in English, because sometimes you have translation of your native language or national language, and it's very difficult to have sentences that make sense. So use very single sentences with a verb, with a very short structure for being understood. So, you know, I'm not so good in English, so I'm French speaking. I can also speak some other language, but when I'm speaking, I make errors. I know that, but what is important is that you can understand what I mean. So, and it's the same. And when we have no contact, when you have no discussion, no return on the discussion, we can only rely on what you are writing. And sometimes we miss information. And if we miss information, we have to ask it to you. And it's a delay in the awarding of the process. So please explain who you are and write for being understood. Demonstrate. Demonstrate, it's a word in English that means that it has to be strong. You have to prove the involvement of the researcher. It's not to give evidence. It means that we have to be sure that the researcher were adequately involved in the process. And you have to give us some proof of that. It means this is the survey. These are the results of the survey. We are taking this kind of information from the survey. We had focus group. We met several times. Our minutes are available there and so on. And you have also to demonstrate that you are coherent and ambitious. You are doing the thing for the best, not too much, not the reverse, less ambition in the process. If you say that you only miss some trainings for the top 10 and for the Nobel Prize in your institution, it's difficult to believe that it's your only gap and that it's your ambition. It can be an ambition, but it's perhaps that some things can be of importance for the researcher that can be put on the top of the list. Involve researchers on a long term. It's difficult. At the early beginning, you will have some conversation with the researcher. They will think that the process is very good, but you have to keep them involved in the process. But Marieke spoke about that during the first meeting. Define indicators and collect data. It's not enough to have good indicators. The existence of something, having a file on the website, for me, it's not enough for being sure that all the people are aware of something, that know about the process and so on. How can we collect data? How can we define the indicators when we say that, so the researcher, they miss awareness of something, so, or they miss knowledge, and how can we estimate, evaluate that they are trained, that they acquire knowledge, that they are aware of something? By counting the number of visits on a website? Perhaps you have to convince the evaluator that it's a good indicator. And maintain documentation, so for looking back. So you will not see on the Your Access platform that it's mandatory to have an update of the gap analysis, but it's a very strong recommendation is to maintain all the documentation you have for having the opportunity to go back to your basics and to show your progress. So if you can look back, you can say what is progress. If you are going and from progress to progress to progress, you forget what was at the start of your reflection and your action. You have to publish the HR strategy and the gap analysis and the action plan, sorry. So what does it mean? It means that you can do it with your own words, but we have to find on a visible and dedicated web page the information regarding your HR strategy. So it means your context, your weakness, a summary of your weaknesses and your strengths, your priority, and the action you would like to do. This is more or less the template of the action plan. You can publish the template as it. You can print your template from the IT tool, but it's less legible. And you can also use your own word and your own structure. But we have to find this kind of information of the website. As I said it before, it's not mandatory to publish your gap analysis, but you have to communicate on your HR strategy for researcher, your objective, and what you plan to do, okay? So it's important to do it also and to show that you are proud of what you are doing with your research. The publication is not only a requirement.
Ya, es que no te preocupes si es que vamos todos súper demolidos. Muchas gracias. Venga, hablamos. Sí, sí, sí. Buen día.
I will try to.
Sí, yo Mateixa.
Oh, we have, can someone please mute the microphone? Someone has.
sorry.
I can do it, so I turn her microphone off. So, so what you can publish and what you are publishing on the website is just like a visible page open to the world. So it's important for your internal community, but also for the external community. So you have to do it for the best. You have to be proud of what you are doing, and it's not just a requirement for the European Union. You have to explain your researcher to embed this action plan in your HR webpage or in your research page and so on, in order to show that you are taking care of this process, taking care of the needs of the researcher, and would like to improve their working conditions. Okay, so, and it's important to have a well-designed page and not only a page with a link to the action plan. Okay, so be proud of what you are doing. Tell the world about your strategy, but also about your success and your progress. Show that your researchers are involved, that you are answering their concern. And then they can also keep in touch with some people who are working on the process. And you can show also that you contribute to the EU expectation or to the ERA, your contribution to the European research area, let's say, ambition and objective. So many of applications are refused because of lack of application of the HR strategy. So, and it's difficult to know why. Probably because you say so, yes, but it's probably a draft of my action plan, so I will not put it on the website directly. But you will miss 3 months. You will be required more, say, more modification. You will have some feedback and some changes. So do it and take the risk to publish directly when you submit your application. If you feel bad with the risk to take, you can be inspired by other institutions. So you can watch the other website, because we have today more than 500 institutions who are awarded, so who publish their HR strategy. So have a look on what the others are doing, how they proceed, how they wrote their action plan. Be inspired in terms of publication, but also in terms of writing the action plan and being transparent on the process. So, and sometimes some institution doesn't make it enough visible. So it has to be, first of all, on the internet, not the intranet. We have to find it easily from your, let's say, website. And very often we don't know if it is in research, in human resources, in which items, and so on. So the link is not so easy to find. And using Google engines or using any web engines, it's better to be able to find it very easily. So use the hashtag HRS4R, because by typing the name of your institution, HRS4R, you can find the information and serve on your website. Publish all what is important for helping to understand and to give visibility of what you are doing that is very good and that is embedded in this action plan. So you can publish meetings of minutes of meetings. You can publish a link to the institutional strategic plan, to other part of the website and so on. And you have very, very good example you can find by typing HRS4R in any search engine on the web. 2 final comments. One on evaluation. We speak about evaluation, but in English we have another word that is assessment. And we prefer to be assessor than evaluator, because evaluation is a judgment of quality. We do not judge your action plan. We are watching what you are doing, and we try to understand what you are doing, and if it relies on the spirit of the implementation of the Charter and Code principle. We are not allowed to say this is a good action or this is not a good action. We can say this action is not fully coherent with the gap. It's not enough described, or is not enough mature for being really or for leading to a successful implementation. But it's not a judgment, it's a command for helping you to increase in quality and possibility of implementation. This is an assessment, and we use this word. Unfortunately, in French, we don't have this word. We have only evaluation. And it's very important for you to understand that we are not as evaluator, as judge, but we are peers who would like to help you to develop the process for the well-being of the researcher and for the creation of era, okay? So I prefer to be named as an assessor or an expert than an evaluator. All the assessors are peers, so we have the same concern. We are working on this question in our institution. So we know about the process, we are trained for being really well aware of all the questions. And it's very important for you to know that the peers are there as assessors and they know what they are speaking about, okay? We commit also with our contract. So it means that our contract is to revise honestly your proposal, to make comments, to respect the agenda, because once you submit, you would like to have some feedback on your submission as soon as possible. We keep the information confidential, and we decline to revise the application if we are in conflict of interest, participant to the same consortium. I had a question because we belong to a project of European University, and one of the university in our European University project was submitting their application, so I declined to revise this project. Okay, we are working by three with a team leader, and it's important to know also that all of us provide our individual, let's say, evaluation, and then we discuss all together for making our recommendation. Okay, so we are not then there. We are there for awarding you, not for not awarding the HRS4R logo. So my final, very final recommendation is that the process is there. Many institutions today are driven by having the award, but not by doing a very interesting HRS4R strategy for the development of the career of the researcher in their institution, or those who they can attract. You have to do it for yourself. You don't have to work on such a complex project only for having or retaining the award. It's very important. And it's important in this context to remember that we all in our institution are taking care of our manpower, the researchers. We are all doing a lot of interesting and important things for the benefits of the researcher and the worker and the stakeholders. And why not asking for being recognized for what we are doing? And it's something that the award can offer. Be coherent, ambitious, and realistic. And you understood that it's not possible to work if you don't have those three conditions, let's say, on the floor. Manage the project as an institutional project. And it's one of the benefits we can have institutionally is to work with the other from for other administration, for other services, work with the researchers and so on. So the benefit is not only for the researcher, it's for the whole functioning of the institution. And if you work on that as an institutional project, you will have the opportunity to develop it on the long term, but also to be partner of the other on the same and common, let's say, transversal program. And it's very, very, let's say, very, very good for the HRS4R manager and for the institution to be able to recognize this kind of benefit, something said by all the institutions. Benefit from the involvement of the researcher, because the researcher, they are really aware of their working condition, and when they contribute, it's very important for them to share the possibility, the opportunity to work for the benefit of themselves, the institution, and the other one. It's also really motivating for them. And tell widely what you are doing and that you are doing it right. It's very important. Be proud of your award. Be proud of saying what you are doing through this project. Once you have the award, so all the work starts, and you have to implement, you have to self-assess, you have to regularly update your files or your initiatives, your actions. And as said by the Spanish proverb, more grows in the garden than the garden knows he has sown. So, and it's very important to be able also to recognize all what is existing at the start of this project. And we have many, many things to describe. And the researcher will tell also about that. I give you, and you will have the presentation with all those links. These are the links that are available on the Your Access platform and where you can find the information. So it's
right now. So Isabelle, if you agree, we can start with the questions. We don't have a lot of them, but okay. So we have some questions on gap analysis. And the first one is from Sinead. She asks, is it mandatory to do a full gap analysis every 3 years? If items are completed and no further action required, do you have to repeat each item in gap analysis?
So it's a questions. Officially, it's not mandatory to do. It's not mandatory to do it. Okay, if you were awarded before 2015, I think the 1st January 2017, the procedure was different, and it was not mandatory to analyze the principle by principle. It was only mandatory to make the summary. But today, on the IT tool, you have to fill in, you have to report regarding every of your action and the gap analysis. So, and it's a question, would it be more convenient to proceed to a new gap analysis and to refer to this update, upgraded, strengthened process? For myself, I think it's better to do it because you will speak the language of the assessors. So if you speak with people that were trained 10 years ago, you will have different reference. We have to adapt to what is the current situation with the gap analysis and with the IT tool. And the current situation is to work with the files that are in the IT tool. It's not mandatory to do it, but you have to keep in mind that it's a very big difficulty for the assessor to evaluate coherence and ambition if you do not provide the gap analysis. So for me, it's better to do it, but it's not mandatory. But if you don't do it, you will have to explain it widely in order for being, in order to be understood by the assessor. So I think that you don't have, it's not mandatory to do and to proceed to the gap analysis. It's not mandatory to update your gap analysis, but you have to demonstrate that you are coherent with the gap analysis, but it's impossible to verify it. So it's a weakness. And you have also to keep in mind that while you are evolving, you have a trend to refer only to your list of action, but not to the gap that motivated the action. And we can see after 8 or 10 years that those who were awarded a long time ago, they refer to their list of action, but they forget that they collected 50 more action, 50 more ideas that were of importance, but that were of second priority. So that's why my recommendation, personal recommendation, is to watch regularly on your gap analysis by saying, okay, but we forget that we had this kind of problem and this kind of need of the researcher. Because you can have diverging way of work that will lead you to forget the essential that was written in your gap analysis. So for me, it's not mandatory, but it's a strong recommendation to do it like that. And when you arrived at the renewal step in the IT tool, you will have to write on your action and to refer to the principle and to re-explain why you are doing those actions. So a strong recommendation, if you can do it, is to proceed to a gap analysis or to make an update or to redescribe what are your main gaps. So I think that we are flexible on this question. So for me, it's not mandatory. I am flexible, but I have to understand your way of thinking, your evolution, your progress, your basics, and so on. And it's difficult. For us, the work is difficult when we don't have the gap analysis updated.
Okay, thank you. So we had a similar question from Yolene. So I hope this question was also answered to you as well. And we have one more question from Sandra, who says, do you provide the questions for the survey, for example, for the researchers in the gap analysis?
So when the institutions are doing a survey, very often they rely on the results of the survey for writing the gaps or for deciding about the priority of the action. So, and we have to understand how they proceeded to the survey and how they extract the information. And if it was really of concern. I will tell you something that happened in some application. So the questions was, do you think that we are compliant with the ethics, the principle on ethics? And do you know about problem of ethics in the institution? It was the question. And they decided to deal with the question, so to create an action if at least 50% of the researchers say no to the question of the ethics. So do you know about problem of ethics in the institution? 33% of the researchers say yes, we know about problem of ethics in the institution. Less than 50%, so we will not deal with the question, it's not a gap. This is misunderstanding of the question. This is a bad analysis of the results of the survey. So that's why it's important for the assessor to know about the question, to know about the gaps and to know about how you deal with the question. 50% of the PhD students say that they have problem with their supervisor. 50. And the answer of the institution was, yes, but you know, the young researcher, one is okay, one say that he has problem, so it's a bad problem. They don't know what is a good supervision. We will not deal with the question. So it means that in terms of well-being of supervision, one PhD student on 2 say that it was a problem, and the institution decided not to deal with this question. So it means that this survey was not really well designed, or the way of interpretation and analysis of the results was not pertinent. And we have to know about that. So if possible, and it's always possible, put an, let's say you have the possibility to join PDF file to your submission. This will be kept confidential, so you do not publish the result of the survey, but it can be good also for your researcher to know about the results. So you can put it on your website, why not? If your website is the communication tool with the researchers, why not write the summary of the survey? So they will be informed of the success. They will be, let's say, involved, and they will stay your partner in the process. So I think that once you have an analysis and generally the institution do it very well, do it strong, they have a report, why not publish the report as a joint file to the submission, so it will be kept confidential, or a summary that can be made available on the website for the researchers.
Okay, thank you. So for the action plan, we didn't receive any concrete questions, but if you agree, I have one on the side for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so you as an expert assessor for many, many years, and you might have mentioned it already during your presentation, but maybe it would be good to emphasize one more time. So in your experience, what are the most common misunderstandings when setting indicators in accordance to the actions and the timeline?
So I think that the misunderstanding is on the action. So very often the action is described as an objective. I would like to have the researcher knowing about ethics rules, okay? This is not an action I would like to have the researcher aware of. The action is what I will do for obtaining this result. The target is to have, the objective is to have the researcher aware of ethics code. But practically, what shall I do for reaching this objective? I will write a short explanation. I will make a folder. I will have some training. I will send postcards. I did it for the thesis to be sent to all the researchers at the beginning of this academic year on ethics. So remember that ethics code exists. Watch our website, and we wish you a very good and a very happy new year in the academic year. So we can do that. This is an action. This is practical action. So, and the question is, I did the postcard, I will send it, and they will receive it, okay? Will they be aware of the code of ethics? Not necessarily. I don't know about that. But I can also, in a survey or in satisfaction, let's say survey, or at the end of some trainings, ask the people, what do you think about your awareness to the code of ethics? And we can have this kind of action. So I think that the most difficult thing is to say, okay, we would like to reach this objective, and what will be practically done? And the responsible of the action, if you ask the vice rector for research, he will say, I would like to have all the researchers aware of. Okay, but how will you define your action? And well, how will you measure that? Because we need other things that's soft interpretation of the situation. Yeah? We have some people say, oh, all the researchers say that they have problems with the methodology and the analysis. Okay, how many researchers would like to attend to training? We can ask this question. So how is it possible to train the people? Shall we make it mandatory? If it is a volunteer basis, you will not reach the same target than if you made it mandatory. How can you verify the increase of the competence of the researchers in the analysis of data, in making research data management plan? These are all questions that are on the floor. So what is the practical things and how will you be able to give arguments and to give evidence that you are progressing and evolving? Mm-hmm. So, and many applications have many actions. That is the writing of rules, flyers, regulation, putting some files on the website. But we do not solve the questions of having more people trained by putting information or by sending an email. And we all know about that, okay? So, and I think it's the most difficult thing you have to reflect on the action plan. And this is a progressive, a cycling process. So it means that you can start by saying, okay, I would first of all put information, write the guidelines, put it on the website, and then how shall you track the awareness or the competencies, the growth of competency. So, and it can be a second step, but you have to describe the different steps. So that's why I think that the use of some tools like the chronograms can help to say, this is my objective, and these are the action and the progressive action I will implement for reaching my objective. So, and I always say, think is not we can say, to think is not an action, okay? To do, what shall you do? What are you doing? So what are you doing in the morning? So, and it's a question of being clear on action, something that that is ask you to move, to do something, but not to reflect, to think, okay?
Okay, so maybe just to ask you something on the completely other side, then what about the applications? And we encounter these situations also often. What about being too ambitious?
I think what, as I said it, what is important is to do it for yourself. The risk of being too ambitious is the risk of failure of everything, okay? If I would like to get married with a guy that is beautiful, young, and rich, I think that I can miss any opportunity I can have to get married, okay? Mm-hmm. But if I clearly defined what are my objectives and agree also that time gives the opportunity to grow in the action, it's also good. The first action you have to put, and I always say it, the first action you have to put on your action list is to celebrate the award when you will get it. It's the first action, and it's very important to have action that will have success and that will be completed within the period you are on. The first 2 years, if you are in the first period, and the 3 other one after that, and every 3 years. You have to say to your board and to your researcher, within 3 years, we will complete that. okay? And if I put on my action plan, all the researchers will have a permanent position, I know that in 50 years, not all the researchers will have a permanent position, because we do not give a permanent position to early stage researchers. And it's sure. So, but we have to work on some aspects that can have success and can help us and can push us to new action that will be successful. And I think that for the ambition, I've seen in one of the last application, 65 action, and the ambition of the university was to have all the action completed within 2 years. My reaction is, you are dreaming. It's a dream, but you will not succeed. And if you start all those actions all together, you will have zero success within 2 years. So select the 10 most important one for you, or the 20 more important one to you, okay? So that's a question of the ambition. And if you describe your context, we can also imagine what is the ambition. Changing the law for making it mandatory for the university professor to do research was the question in one of the institutions I had to visit. And it was the key for starting to evolve in research in the university. One action can make sense within in a period of 2 years. Only one action, but you have to do it at the end. Okay.
Okay, great. And we have just one more question on the publication, also from Sinead. So she asks, in previous submissions, we used to put on the website the strategy, action plan, and the gap analysis too, but realize that are not required. With the new online tool, is it better to put the version on the website?
I have no answer to the question. So what is the most interesting for you, depending of the culture of those who will watch your website? It's my answer. So the website has to be clear, has to show that you are progressing, that you are taking care of your HRS4R award or a strategy. And you have also to do it according to the, let's say, the culture of your institution. And I'm sure that here in Belgium, we will not present the same on the same way that they will do it in Lithuania or in Serbia. I think that the culture is different, and what is important is to be coherent with what you are. So using the template that are provided on the European platform, it's easy, it's convenient. You have only to make a print and to print it and to put it, okay? But if you want to explain it, because it's more didactical, it's more educational, it's more important for you to show it and to show and to provide information to your researcher and worldwide, you can do it. So for me, it's not better to have one or the other one. And personally, I think it's better to have it tailor-made than to have it standardized. But it's not, I'm not sure that all the evaluators that share the same opinion, because it's more comfortable to have a same scheme for all the presentation. But I think that it's your freedom to do it as you would like to do it. But some elements are mandatory, is to explain the HRS4R strategy. And for the explanation, it's your context, it's your, let's say, strengths and weaknesses, and it's your plan and your action plan. So, and that's why it's completely what is today in the action plan template, so what you fill online. So I would like to point out and to ask perhaps the participant to watch to Anka questions, or perhaps to give Anka the floor for some comments she makes on the chat. So Anka, is it possible for you to make a summary of what you wrote, or you prefer I write it?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Anka.
Hi. Sorry, I won't put my camera on because I wasn't planning to intervene. Since Isabel asked, I can't say no to Isabel, never. So basically, just to synthesize what I wrote on the chat, first about the templates. The templates that you find, the word templates that you find in the policy library are not an exact copy of the fields that you have to fill in online. That is why we encourage all institutions not to use those templates. Those are for guidance and orientation only. So when you start filling in your action plan, your gap analysis, it's important to start online. And in the online forms, you can save a draft. So it's not necessary to do all the application at once. You can save a draft and then come back to it later. There's another trick that many institutions don't know. When you right-click on any field in the gap analysis or in the action plan, you have the option to print. And when you click print, you actually have the option to save the document as a PDF. So if you want to share it with some other members of the team or have it for your own purposes, you can actually save a PDF version of what you wrote so far. However, sometimes, the boxes are have a scroll down bar at the right hand side, so you won't be able to see everything you wrote if your text is very long and you have to scroll with the bar. It might not be very evident what I'm saying now, but when you are in the document itself, you will see it's easy. And for the other question about the revision of the charter and code, it might be that someone from the task force is already online, but just to say that there is a task force for the ERA a standing working group on human resources and mobility that are working on a proposal to revise the chartering code, to update it more, in line with new emerging challenges and new developments such as open science or gender. So they are working on that now. It's at the member states level, and I think Lana is part of the task force.
Yeah.
And yes, and basically, the chartering code will not be revised when their work is done. Of course, the work of the task force is very, very important in the revision of the chartering code. However, the timeline is much bigger than that. And we are at the Commission. We also launched a study on the ERA Priority 3, on the policy measures such as EU access and HRS4R. And based on the results of this evaluation study, which will be completed hopefully around May next year, and on the work of the ERA standing group, then we can start working on the actual revision of the charter and code. So it will take much, much longer. So at this moment, we are not able to say anything about what's going to happen and whether there will be a revolution of the charter and code or just an evolution taking into account new developments and new emerging challenges. So I think that's all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anka, very much. Okay, so Isabelle, I think we don't have any more questions. Any final remarks from your side?
No, thank you. Thank you very much. I think we answer all the questions. So do not hesitate if you have any question to send it to Lana or to send it to me. So we will put the presentation, I think, on the website. Perhaps can you give us some few words about that? And I would like to thank you all for the time you spent to listen to me. It was a pleasure to share with you. I think it's one of the richness of this this process is also to have a network of peers and to work with colleagues. And thank you very much for your interest.
Thank you, Isabelle, for your most valuable experience and for sharing it with us selflessly. So thank you very, very much once again. It was a very insightful webinar.